In this video, I'll show you how to implement what I refer to as the infinite data pattern for AJAX. And the idea is that with this new style of applications development that we call AJAX, the client and the server maintain this communication between each other, and the client often is requesting that the server send new or updated or additional data. Now, everybody's seen AJAX service method calls that append data to the page, but in this case, we want to only display data in a fixed region of screen real estate. So think of the example of a blog aggregator where I have a web service method that selects new blog entries and sends them down to the client to be displayed. And so new blog entries in an aggregator, so if you look at something like weblogs.asp.net, I mean every minute there are new blog posts. So we only want to display a fixed number of them so that we don't just fill up the whole screen with blog posts. So in our case, we're going to build an application that looks a little bit like this. Notice this blue area, we have a fixed amount of screen real estate, and by default, when we first build, we have these entries. But based on some action on the client, and this can be either something that the user actually does or a timer or what have you, we're going to use a first in, first out algorithm and push the oldest item off the screen and add the newest ones. And I can just do this forever, thus the name infinite pattern. Right, and I could just keep doing this, and I'm only going to show 5. So to do this, let's close this instance of Visual Web Developer and fire up a new one. Start from scratch, create a new ASP.NET application, and first step, as is usually the case, is to go down to the Extensions tab in the toolbox and grab a script manager and put it on the page. Now the first thing that we're going to do, let's change the name here. So the first thing that we're going to do is add a web service that's going to be used to fetch that data. So we'll create a new web service object. And because we're going to make this an AJAX web service, let's import system.web.scripts .services, and now down here we can attribute this class so that the methods in this class are exposed to AJAX. And basically what this is doing is telling the ASP.NET runtime that the methods that are found in this class definition, we want them to be AJAX callable. So the AJAX runtime will know that it needs to generate JavaScript proxies to call this web service when the script manager asks for them. All we need to do is specify that this is going to be a script service. And now we can implement it. Let's get rid of the name Hello World and call this item fetch. And here in item fetch, this is where you would, go to your, pull data from your news service or look for new records in the database or wherever you would, whatever you would query to get the latest new additions to the data you want to return to the server. In our case, we're just going to increment a number and return some text just so we can demonstrate different text being returned every time. So to do that, let's add a shared integer variable. And we'll start with it equal to 0. And then down here in item fetch, we'll say, hey, whatever that is, make it equal to 1 more than it is. And then instead of returning hello world, we'll return my index as a string. And that's all we'll need for our web service, right? So understand that in a real application, you would fetch some new data to be sent back to the client. In our case, we're just going to fabricate data that will look different than the other entries that have been displayed just for the purposes of the demonstration. Okay, so back here in our default.aspx page, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to need to be able to access that web service. So let's add a services collection to the script manager, and we're going to add a reference, set the path equal to webservice.asmx, And now down here in our form, I'm just going to center our content here just for convenience of viewing. And here in this div, so this div is where we're going to display the data that we return from the web service, as well as the initial data, which will be static to our page. So let's set an ID. And for you VB folks, remember that this is JavaScript that we're going to be accessing this with. So case sensitivity is in effect. Just for visual effect, let's set a style here, and I'm going to set a background color. And I'm going to have to guess at the color because I can't remember what it was, but I think this will be close. And then let's also just set a width parameter just so that we don't take up the full page. I'll make that about 350 pixels. Alright, so there's our div, and that's all we're going to put in there at design time. All of the content will be populated at runtime. So let's add a couple of line feeds. And now we're going to need a button. I don't want an ASP.NET button. I'm just going to use an HTML button because it's just going to be a client-side event that calls a AJAX callable script service. So we'll call this add new item, and so that you don't have to watch me type, I'll hop into design mode and double click on that button as soon as I figure out where it went. And where it went is here, so IntelliSense gets confused when you break XML formatting. Alright, now I can double click on that guy and get an event handler. And the first thing that we're going to do is inside our script section here, we want to we're going to display some static content first, so we're going to need to calculate for that. The first thing I'm going to do is add a variable called array count, and array count is going to be the number of items that we want to display. So in our case, it's going to be 5. Now, this means that we're going to count through 5 items in a data structure, and 5 is the number we're going to key on. We could change it to 6 or whatever we wanted. Now, that's just the count for how we're going to iterate through the collection of data. We're actually going to need an array to do that with. So let's create a variable called listData, and let's make that a JavaScript array object. And in it, we're going to put 3 sets of data. Now, we're just returning numbers as strings from our web service, but in the case of the initial content, just to show you that this is just content can be anything, let's put some HTML links in here. So let's make it an anchor tag and give it an href, and we don't want to use double quotes because we'll screw up our string. So let's make it a single quote, and we'll make these links to my blog at joeon.net. And we can close our anchor tag and terminate. And now I can add 4 more of these so that we create a full sort of set of 5 items for our array, right? Remember that we set the array count to 5, so we're going to populate an array that has 5 items in it. Right? And it's just a random number that I chose. And just so that we can distinguish them in display, let's change them to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, the next thing we're going to want is a page load event. Since we're dynamically determining what to display in our all data div, first thing that we're going to want to do when the page loads, even though we're not calling the web service yet, is display the initial data. So to do that, let's define a page load function. And inside page load, we'll call a method that we haven't defined yet called display data, and that's going to be the thing that actually displays the 5 items that are contained in this array in the div that we've defined a little bit lower down. So let's go ahead and define display data. So make a function. Display data, we don't need any arguments. And what display data is going to do here is we're going to iterate through all of the items in the array and stick all 5 separated by a line feed into the all data div. So the first thing we're going to do is get a reference to that div. So document dot get element by ID, and you can use the Microsoft client library shorthand of $get, of course. I just am forgetting to do it in this particular instance. But so let's get a reference to the all data div, and let's set the inner HTML element to be an empty string, right? So we're going to empty it out because we're going to reconstruct it in the order that we want, remembering that the first item that came in is the first item that goes out. So we're going to keep the list of items in chronological order. And now we can just iterate through all of the items in the array. So let's say for I equal, and notice IntelliSense always wants to turn I into an if. So if you're an old C programmer like me, that'll throw you off. So I equal array count -1 to compensate for JavaScript's zero-based array system. And then I less than or equal to 0, and then I plus plus and now for each item in that array we're going to stick it into the all data div HTML elements. So we're going to say document.get element by ID for all data. The inner HTML element is going to be list data sub I, so whichever the current iterance that we're on is, plus a line feed. So let's add a break, right? So each one appears on its own line, and then whatever else is in that div. Right? So we're just going to walk through each one and append each item along with a line feed, and that will give us the display that we want. So next, now we can program that service call. So here in the button add new item click event handler, we can say web service, or should I say, we're going to call this web service. So we'll say web service dot item fetch, and we don't have any user provided arguments, so the only thing that we need to add here is on complete and on error handlers for the asynchronous calls, right? And now we can say function on error return data, and function on complete. And you want to do more error handling than this. We're just going to say, hey, if there was an error, say just pop up a dialog that says service error. You probably don't want to do that in your real application, but it's great for a quick test. And now here all we need to do is do a little bit of arrangement in our array. So what I'm going to show you is certainly not extremely efficient data structure programming, but it's just the most straightforward way to illustrate. What we want to do is push the oldest element out of the array and move all of the other elements up one so that the fifth element in the array is available for the new data that we just retrieved. Okay, so how we're going to do that is we're just going to walk through in another for loop, and we're going to say for I is equal to 0. And there's that IntelliSense correcting me incorrectly again. So we're going to say for I equals 0 while I is less than array count minus 1, again 0-based arrays, I plus plus and then inside that loop we're going to simply move all of the items up one. So we don't care about the 0th item. We're just going to overwrite that. We'll say list data I, right? So it'll be 0 through 4 for the 5 items in the array, and we're going to say for each one of those, move the one that's below it up one. All right, right, and we don't care about the destructive right. That'll work just fine. And once we've done all of that, so what we're doing is moving each of the items up one, wiping out the one at the top of the array, and then once we've done that, we're happy to say list data for array count minus 1, which is the bottommost element in the array, equal whatever we got back from the service method call, which is, in our case, return data. Again, that's a string. And then all we have to do is call display data. All right, now we can go ahead and run this and find all of my JavaScript coding mistakes. Of which there is definitely one, since the elements didn't display. Okay, let's find my JavaScript mistake. Yep, that's the problem right there. I have an infinite JavaScript loop because I'm incrementing the wrong way. So let's go ahead and give it one more try. Alright, there are items, so you can see they're links. I could click on them and navigate. Now, if I click on the add new item, the old ones get pushed off and the new ones get inserted, and I can do this ad infinitum as many times as I want, thus the name InfiniteData pattern for AJAX. So hopefully this gives you an idea about how you can use screen real estate in a way that consistently fetches new data from whatever your data source is, but still doesn't corrupt the use of screen real estate that's in your user's best interest. So there you go.